My name is Doug Millar. I'm a full-time investigator of violent crimes against children covered up by law enforcement. I've been specializing in this for over 20 years now, full-time. Started in Santa Rosa, California, where I learned that children were being brought to our county and also to the city of Santa Rosa, sexually abused, tortured, and murdered on film. The FBI was notified about it, and they were refusing to do anything about it. And I realized I had just felt I had found or discovered the Achilles heel of the New World Order, something I'd never even heard about before. I was so horrified by it that instead of spending the day as I had planned to do, it was the National Day of Prayer, and I ended up spending committing with a family to meet with them for an hour to discuss what the problem was. And my friend said, "We need more than an hour, Doug." I said, "No, any problem can be defined in an hour." He was afraid to tell me on the phone what it was. Well, when I learned what it really was all about, I left that family 14 hours later, met the child victim, her father. Of course, I met her mother and her little sister in a park. This is back in spring of 1992. I'm still doing it full time now. I've done it in over 20 states nationwide, and we have a nationwide network now of people who have co-founded a group we call Unite for Justice, with over 80 of us, most of us nationally prominent, and in over 20 states. Just keep rolling. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll let you might ask a question. Well, for the last 20 years, I've been going to different shows, gun shows, preparedness shows, you name it, all over the country. And I like to show people this picture, and I ask them, male or female? Thousands of people have seen this photograph. 80% say female, but they're all wrong. This is Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, Army Special Forces, CIA, because all Army Special Forces officers have always been, CIA from the inception of the CIA and the inception of Special Forces. And the lady that took this picture, of all things, I had the privilege of interviewing her for an hour and a half on the phone back in 1993 because she was writing a book about her experiences with him, and it's called The New Satanists. But she said, if you have seen the book Painted Black, you will have seen Aquino's picture in there. I said, yes, I have seen that. I've got a copy of it. She said, well, you need to know that I'm the one that took that photograph, and that garment strap on his shoulder, it was my garment bag after we'd spent Saturday night there on the military base. And my friend that was with me from Texas, he'd had a child that had been sexually abused and tortured by Satanists, and he asked, since Aquino was the #1 high priest in the Church of Satan under Anton LaVey back in the late 1960s, and he was the up until 1975 when he left the Church of Satan and formed the Temple of Set. Both headquarters are, of course, right here in San Francisco. He said, did you have normal sex? She said, well, not exactly, because he liked to drive us behind his mother's home in an alley, and he said that he said it was really weird. She said that he told me that intercourse was for animals, but we are higher beings than that, and so we masturbate each other, and that's all we did for sexual gratification. Well, it implies, of course, he's a victim of his mother for one thing, but he's also been well versed in let people know that his mother, whose maiden name was Betty Ford, not Jerry Ford's wife, of course, but he said that she went to Germany right after World War II, was impregnated by a Nazi SS officer but we never disclosed who the person was. And we'll describe who we have evidence and why we believe the person is who he is, and later in this presentation. But first I want to go to some documentation. Here is a U.S. News and World Report. This is the January 24th, 1994 issue. And you can see on the cover here, it talks about the fact human guinea pigs. And I want to read it to you to make sure. Cold water guinea pigs. The government's secret experiments using radiation, mind control, chemicals, and drugs on its citizens. Aquino's specialty is CIA mind control, sex abuse of people, preferably ages 2 to 4. Then they split the personality by torture, sodomy, drugging them, and then they program those altered personalities, because when a child is sexually abused, and it hurts obviously, it splits the personality. And so the mother and father see the personality went to the daycare or out with maybe a grandpa, or went to a church in some cases. Let me assure you, there are a lot of cases of this we have on file. And now the parents see this personality that went to that location, but they don't realize that little Johnny and little Janie have altered personalities. Not just one, but several, because when different forms of torture occur, they can't handle it, and so it splits them off into altered personalities, some male, some female in the same person. So now little Johnny and little Janie can be programmed to, one could be a drug runner as a child. Who would suspect a child walking down the street with a lunch pail might have drugs, CIA drugs in those lunch pail? Or they could be a child sex slave. And then another personality, a third one, could be a spy. A fourth one could be a spy who also assassinates, is assigned to go out and kill people. And it goes on and on. And that's where the term Manchurian Candidate came from. Now, this is a very interesting article, because this came out 1 month after they found Klaas's body in our county. She was kidnapped from our county in Petaluma, which is about 15 or 20 minutes from my home. And what happened was she was kidnapped on October 1st, 1993. And we suspected that initially, because we were holding weekly meetings in a church in Santa Rosa exposing what was going on in the county, and we were building a big network, and we had Johnny Camp come to town from Lincoln, Nebraska, and he wrote a book called The Franklin Cover-Up, Child Abuse, Satanism, and Murder in Nebraska, exposing a nationwide network. And in that story, in that book, he quotes a statement by Ted Gunderson, former head of the FBI from Los Angeles. Now, I've been working with Ted Gunderson and John DeCamp since the fall of 1992 in many states. And we've did a lot of things separately and a lot of things together. I've met them in many states, actually. In fact, Ted Gunderson, before he passed away last year with bladder cancer, he told me that the fact that I had a contract put out on him in the early 1980s, and he said, and it was Aquino that put the contract on him, because he was investigating, exposing Satanism and CIA drug running in America. And so for a year and a half, Ted had to try and operate his private investigating firm out of motel rooms and on the run around the country until they finally just broke him. He couldn't operate anymore, but he was able to finally get the contract, $35,000 contract, lifted off him before he was murdered. And so I give you this background because I've had the privilege of working with many of the top people in America, exposing Aquino, exposing why would the CIA get involved in Satanism? It's such a contradiction, you would think, in and because they wanted Manchurian candidates, and they found it was the best way was to hurt the children when they're small, split their personalities, and then they come back in their lives as they grow up, and they use them for many different things. Now, after Polly Klaas's body was found, as I said, this story came out. But before this story came out, there was one a month earlier. It was dated December 27th that week, which was between Christmas and New Year's. And it was only a one-page story, but it was called The Finders. If you go on the internet and look up CIA The Finders, you'll see, and put in U.S. News and World Report, you'll find that it's a shocker to find out that the CIA was exposed in Washington, D.C., involved in child sex slavery, shipping children overseas. The police raided the Finders, and the man that ran it, he said that, no, I'm not an employee of the CIA, but I do have contracts with them. I teach them how to use computers. His wife, of course, was also working for the CIA, and his son was flying for the CIA, Air America. During the Vietnam War, you can check it out, it's very well documented. Air America was running the CIA drugs out of the Bermuda area, and they were running them all over into America. The CIA that was really a CIA war. And Johnny Camp, that wrote the Family Cover-Up, he actually was assigned to the CIA when he got over there. He was an attorney who kept taking advanced courses, hoping the war would get over. And he took so many courses, plus the fact that he's being an attorney, and plus the fact that he spoke 5 languages fluently, the CIA wanted him. So when he went over to the Vietnam War, he was in charge of a company of about 100 men, and in the infantry, and he was ordered to meet with the vice ambassador in the Saigon embassy, and the man's name was Bill Colby. Some people, of course, will recognize that name because Bill Colby became the head of the CIA later on after the Vietnam War was over for a short stint. But he exposed too much about the CIA's mind control to the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee, and therefore Kissinger ordered Gerald Ford, his first act as president was to fire Bill Colby. Bill Colby became John DeCamp's closest friend and ally and mentor for 25 years until he was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered a tributary to the Potomac, and they said his canoe capsized, and of course it was a lie. John DeCamp found out from Ted Gunderson, like I say, former head of the FBI from Los Angeles, that it was so interesting that Colby was tortured for 4 days before they put a bullet in his head, and they said he drowned in the Potomac's tributary. So our country has been basically, I believe that most people that join the FBI, join the CIA, are good, honest, honorable people when they join. But in order to get ahead in the organizations anymore, they have to compromise their principles. And once they get you to break your moral values and you cover up for somebody else's crime, or you commit a crime, then they control you very easily, and then they can get you to do other bigger crimes, and that's the way the FBI and the CIA now operate. And we got the documentation to prove it, which we'll cover as we go through this. So when, now back to this Cold War guinea pigs. When you open it to pages 32 and 33, it's a double-fold cover. And you see the Pentagon in the center here, right here. You see the CIA logos, 3 of them here. You see a needle. They would use these needles to inject people. And you see one on each side of the Pentagon. And you see a lot of other things, like the A-bomb going off on both sides of the Pentagon. There was a split personality, symbolizing symbolizing the CIA. And this entire story, and the cover and 5 other pages are all about the CIA mind control. On every page they talk about MK Ultra, Project MK Ultra, throughout the whole thing. And so it's really sad, because I never wanted to believe this, that the CIA had been corrupted to the point where it now is blackmailing members of Congress. And people say, oh, come on, they wouldn't be blackmailing members of Congress. Well, I want to just show you a headline from the Washington Times, a daily paper in Washington, D.C. This is the headline story, one of 8 in a period of a few, well, first of all, one of 4 in a period of 8 days, and then one of 8 in a period of just a few weeks. And the Washington, of course, the Times is a daily paper. It's not as big as the Washington Post, but it's much more credible because it tells the truth about the CIA. And look at the title here. Power brokers served drugs, sex at parties bugged for blackmail. In other words, they were exposing the fact that the CIA was inviting people to parties, and it's all in the Franklin cover-up. It's well documented. In fact, even DeCamp even quotes 2 CIA officers. One he names, the other one he wasn't allowed to name, and saying that if we couldn't get somebody to go along with the CIA's agenda, if they were a member of Congress, or a admiral, a general, or a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, we just invite them to a party. And then we'd put a drug in their drink that they could not see, taste, or smell. And I've interviewed a CIA assassin, Chip Tatum, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and a CIA assassin working under Colby for 22 years. And he said it was called scopolamine. So scopolamine is also a name of a drug. You get a prescription drug by that name. I don't know why they would want a name of that, but I asked Chip Tatum in February of 1998 when we were all speaking, Ted Gunderson, there were a whole bunch of us, about 15 of us were speaking to this national conference, and I asked Chip Tatum, I said, so if you gave me scopolamine, well, first of all, where does it come from, Chip? He said, well, it comes from the heart of a plant in Central and South America. The witch doctors, the shaman use it they control the people, and everybody's afraid of them because they have so much control with this drug. And I said, well, if you gave it to me, for example, how long would I stay under the drug? He said, I could put you under for 30 minutes, 30 hours, or 30 days. You'd have no recall of anything you did then during the entire time you were under the influence of the drug. And you would do crimes that your conscience would not allow you to do if you're like a zombie. And that was a fascinating interview. And Ted Gunderson interviewed him. You go on the internet and find it. It's called CIA Mind Control Goes Public. I hope you all write that down and go to the internet and look it up. Mind Control Goes Public. And in there, Chip Tatum's in there, Ted Gunderson's interviewing him, and also 2 ladies, one by the name of Bryce Taylor, and the other one, her real name is, actually I should say her real name is Sue Ford, but she was going as using her pseudonym at that time. And the other one was Barbara Hartwell, who both of them are back under CIA mind control again. And I'm sad to say they're both being forced to work for the CIA. So they let these people sometimes surface, and it's hard to understand how the CIA operates. But here's a report I put together after 2 years of full-time investigating just in Sonoma County. That's where Bohemian Grove is. If you haven't looked up Bohemian Grove, I encourage you to go to it. You'll see, if you type in on YouTube, Doug Millar and Bohemian Grove, you'll see where we had some protests out there a year ago, and again this year, 2 years in a row, and the result was that there's technology now that they can shoot at you to put you under mind control temporarily. They heighten your emotions. They call them non-lethal weapons, but it's a lie. They can target your heart and give you a heart attack. They can, in other words, murder you, or they can target your different organs because all your organs have different cells. And so they just dilate the cell that they wanted to attack, and they can give you cancer of any vital organ in your body. And in Gunderson's case, they hit about 6 years before he died. His doctor said to him, Ted, I see you got blue and purple fingernails. He said, do you know what caused that? And Ted said, I have no idea. He said, well, you've been hit with cyanide and arsenic. And his webmaster told me, he was with him at the time, and he said, Doug, I saw Ted's blood just drain from his head all the way down to his neck, to his shoulders. He was as white as a ghost when he realized that it was just a matter of time before he died. And but he was very healthy. He was living. He was actually at 82 when he finally died, but he didn't. Was really bizarre. He died from bladder cancer, and the one of the things that happen when you get hit with arsenic and cyanide is you get bladder cancer. So Aquino and his boys finally got Ted, but he lived a long time. He's investigating, exposed Aquino and these CIA people and the FBI, who he was proud to work for 27 and a half years, exposing them that they'd become so corrupt that he said it was the old FBI and the new FBI, and that's he was exposing the new FBI. So anyway, back in '94, I put this report out, a full-time report about my first 2 years of investigation. Target your children and grandchildren. And here, where have all the children gone? Here's a photograph of Aquino right here, the same photograph I showed you earlier. Here's a photograph of Klaas. Here's a photograph of a young man by the name of Paul Benassi. And Paul Benassi is the key witness in the book, The Frank the Cover-Up. I won't steal the whole thunder, but Paul Benassi was the first person to expose the fact that they practice cannibalism and do human sacrifices, murder children at Bohemian Grove. It's in the book, The Frank the Cover-Up. People don't want to believe that, of course. Oh, they're just a bunch of drunken people out there. Well, obviously, just like Masons, most of the Masons are wonderful people. They haven't got a clue what goes on at the top. But at the top of the 33-degree Masons, they worship Lucifer. And there have been some Masons that have actually exposed that fact. And, of course, they lost their lives for doing it. But the bottom line is freedom's not free. If we're not willing to stand up and expose the crimes and corruption of our own government, how can we go around attacking other countries all over the world now like we're doing and think that we're doing it properly? This is actually a 20-page report, and it'll be in my book. Here's the table of contents of this 20-page report. Now, here's a flyer that we put out 4 years ago, this October, and it was next month, actually next week. And 4 debate challenges, where Ted Gunderson and I challenged Michael Aquino and his wife to debate us publicly. And we held 4 news conferences to publicize the debates. And of course, here's a photograph of the Aquinos with their satanic logo above them at the Temple of Set. And the inverted star, the 5-pointed star, goes all the way back to the 1500s. It's always been a symbol of Satanism, and the reason is the 2 points. When we draw a star, we always draw it with 1 point up on the American flag, but 2 points up when they invert it. That's for the 2 horns of the goat. The 2 points on the side are the ears, the big floppy ears that the goats have, and of course the lower one is the goat's head. And that's the symbol of the Church of Satan under Anton LaVey. And of course, all these Satanists use the same symbol. They just maybe change the design, the color of it, or whatever. But here's a report now from the Department of Honor, Department of the Army. This is dated April 26, 1982. And we won't get into it now, but anyway, I've got several pieces of correspondence here from the Army. And here's a San Francisco Chronicle story that came out when Aquino got exposed for sexually abusing children and the Army base Presidio in the daycare on base in 82, 83. And you see here it says, Army says Constitution lets Satanists hold top secret job. What's gone wrong with our military that we have Satanists that are being exposed for torturing and murdering children, and they're being allowed to do it and no prosecution? That was in the early 80s. Now we're talking about 30 years later, and he's still doing it. He spent 40 years in the Army and retired. I've got his honorary discharge from the Army, dated 2006. 4 years. He went in on his birthday and he came out on his birthday. And he was protected by this military CIA officer who's now a brigadier general in our military. In the Army's, he works in the Psychological Operations Command. In other words, for the CIA, where at Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg is a Special Forces military base, which means it's, the Green Berets. Remember I told you, all the officers are CIA officers. That doesn't mean all the people in it know they're working for the CIA, because I'm sure that most of the lower ranks don't know they're working for the CIA. But this general here, he's a general not only in the and defended Aquino back in the early 80s when he got exposed, but I've been confronting him about it when he spoke in Santa Rosa, because he lives in Sonoma County. And he's a judge there. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger appointed him to be a judge. He'd been working out of the DA's office. Why would a CIA officer be working out of the district attorney's office in Sonoma County? Because we were exposing, I maintain it's because we were exposing Aquino. And we were exposing the CIA there. And that's why we figured it was a retaliation. When they kidnapped Klaas, that was retaliation, because I'll show you a book that her grandfather endorsed, very important book for you to understand how deep this really goes. Here's the book that Klaas's grandfather endorsed. I don't have time to get into all the details of how I learned about it, but here it is right here. Breaking the Circle of Satanic Ritual Abuse. And his endorsement was on the back of the book. And it says, recovering and recognizing from this hidden trauma. I guess I reversed it here. Recognizing and recovering from the hidden trauma by Daniel Ryder. And so when they opened the headquarters there, we all knew from the first night that Klaas was kidnapped. We didn't know the family, but we all, our network, we were meeting every week, and we were all traumatized. My God, they're coming after people we don't even know. We thought they were going to come after our children or our grandchildren. Never considered they'd come after somebody that we didn't know, but we were risking that because we knew we had to protect children from these kind of crimes. And so I want to read to you just real briefly his statement. Joe Klaas, author of the 12 Steps to Happiness, and also the author of Staying Clean. In other words, he was an alcoholic. Breaking the circle of satanic ritual abuse is both a mind blower and a mind healer. It horrifies yet heals. It offers tested techniques and 12 tried and true steps for recovery from abuse so terrifying and unthinkable that its shock for life victims can't remember what evils ail them without this kind of help. One valuable component of the book is the author's compassionate and insightful sharing of his own 12-step recovery and that of others as part of working through this extreme trauma. And so when I rushed down, as soon as they opened the headquarters, which was on the Monday, right after she was kidnapped on a Friday night, on October 1st, I said, 1993. And so I was over in Sacramento at the time when she was kidnapped, and so I came back the next morning, and we were looking for a satanic lake where they took children. And so I was going around with a real estate agent, and I had Oregon plates in my car, and it was a good cover because just saying I was looking for a place I could have a lake on my property. And we finally found the lake, but it wasn't because of Klaas's kidnap. It was in spite of that fact. Two mothers took their children out looking for the lake, and they were living in two different counties, and their children were tortured by Aquino in both those counties. And so, as it turned out, that's how we found the lake, and we went there just before Halloween took place. When Polly was kidnapped, we thought it was a possibility she may still be there. Maybe they would be keeping her in this cave under. You had to go down through the water, and then the children would walk up the steps with the adult, and the children wouldn't have masks on. They'd just hold their breath. You can imagine how scary that was. And then they would walk up in this cave, and we found the location, but the water was too cold. It was a spring-fed lake, and it was just too cold. Our diver, who was in the Marines in the Vietnam War, who was an attorney, he said, I don't have enough weights on it, I can't get down far enough, and I had a string on him. I shouldn't say string. Let's say a cord you would use for hanging clothes on. So it had pretty good strength. And the idea was, in case he triggered something underwater, it would knock him out. So my job was, we had a guy up on a hillside behind some brush with a rifle up there as our protection, because we were out there in the wide open, and there were cabins on the lake and everything, 3 or 4 there, and so in case he was knocked out, my job, of course, was to pull him out of the water as fast as we could, so I didn't fill his lungs with water, but also, obviously, we were very concerned about being out there in the open, as you can imagine, and so all this stuff is like sci-fi, but the fact is that we figured that she would be a human sacrifice on Halloween, because they actually, if you look at the satanic calendar, they call for human sacrifices on October the 28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st. So we figured, well, the 31st would probably be the best time for that, because they had all this national publicity and worldwide publicity about this girl being kidnapped from her bedroom slumber party. And so it was the most publicized kidnap of a child in the history of the world. And so when I told Joe Klaas, I said, Joe, I need to ask you a question. Was there anything that your daughter, she had 2 friends with her at the slumber party that night. I said, there was anything those 2 girls saw that was either a tattoo on this person that kidnapped your granddaughter, or was there any tattoos, jewelry, clothing of any time indicate that he was a Satanist? Oh my God, no! My God, no! He just went nuts. I'm sorry, Joe. What? He said, I should have been the first to think about that. I said, why would anybody think of something as sick as that? He said, because I endorsed a book about Satanism exposing it a year ago. I said, oh, Joe, I'm sorry to hear that, but I said, lots of people endorse books on Satanism. They don't get their children or grandchildren kidnapped. There's got to be the motive's got to be in that book. And sure enough, I said, what's the name of the book? I wrote it down. What's the name of the author? He said, I can't remember. I said, you can't remember the name of the book and you endorsed it? How could that be? He said, well, because what happened was my friend that endorsed the book. He was a victim of Satanists on both sides of his family all the way back for generations. And he knew that the penalty for exposing their code of silence and secrecy was you don't get murdered, you get tortured to death. And so he used a pseudonym. And so he couldn't remember what the guy's pseudonym was. He just remembered his real name because he was a mentor to this guy when they were both AA. And so the result was that next morning Joe called me at the headquarters. I was there and early every morning at 6 a.m. And he called me about 7:30 or so and said, Daniel Ryder. And there's the section there on mind control, but the summary talks about the Marionette program where they would have experimental laboratories. They did all forms of drugs, all forms of mind control, splitting personalities, and programming people to become assassins. That's where probably a good time to leave off.